Hello everyone, this is Gilles for Real Sound Reviews, and today we are starting this channel speaking about this computer here. This is a Hackintosh. You will see that it's also a Ryzentosh, but I find him a special name, which is the Blackintosh. It has been built from a musician and sound engineer point of view, and it answers to a very specific need, which is silence. So, this channel will speak mainly about sound and music, but not only, and I wanted to start with, the story of someone who tries to build a computer because he needs silence, and like many of you down there, I am making my sound recording in the same place I am making my mixes and mastering. And I think silence really is a key factor we have today, the possibility of cleaning the sound like never before, but garbage in, garbage out, and I prefer to solve the problem up front, right at the source of sound recording.
Be silent! Keep your forked tongue behind your teeth.
And I am glad and proud to start by a computer that eventually is a form of experimentation in itself. So let's start with this case down there, which is the DB4 Streamcom. The DB4 Streamcom is a premium case, well packed and inviting. The cooling system is unusual because the case is the cooler itself. It is conducted from the CPU to the panels using copper pipes that one have to assemble with great caution. Don't bend one of his pipes because this build is going to turn into a nightmare. The build is not very difficult, even if it requires patience and care, but not more than the average requirements when you are doing any build. Inside the case, the motherboard is standing vertically. Initially I went for a Z390, but be careful choosing your motherboard. An additional cooling kit will enable you to use a CPU with 110 watts of TDP, but be aware that not all the motherboards will allow you to do such a thing. With the Z390 it's impossible because of a VRAM on the side. No problem with the X-770 Aorus Pro Wi-Fi, there is plenty of space. About the storage, I came to a Samsung Evo Nvme format, and as you can see, saying that this build is completely fanless is not absolutely true. As these modern SSD reach very high speeds, they need an appropriate cooling solution. The power supply I choose is also a premium solution. This is a silent power supply made by HDPlex. This solution requires an external brick like on some biggest Dell gaming laptops, and the rest of the configuration is the current soft spot for many users, a Ryzen 5 3600X and 32 gigs of Corsair Ram, plain and simple. If you want to add a discrete GPU, you will need to buy an additional cooling kit. And about the GPU, this is where this build became kind of tricky. You face two limitations. First, there are no drivers for NVIDIA graphic cards in the Apple environment, and you will have to choose an AMD whatsoever. But another limitation comes from the case itself. In this format you can only use small ITX, so as you understand the choice was very limited. So only one card remained to my knowledge, the RX 5700 by Power Color. and I have to admit it was a bold move. Ali Syed of Optimum Tech roasted this graphic card because the thermals were an absolute disaster, mainly because of the fan profile. Apparently the RX 5600 even smelled fire. I was quite optimistic to think that passive cooling would solve this problem. But in fact, it worked. So now let's have a look at the performance. Most of the time, this build is ahead of the most over-spec'd Intel MacBook Pro 16 inches from 2019.
Dragging just a hair.
Comparing a desktop computer to a laptop is only a non-challenge, but still, this is very impressive and it shows how valuable AMD Hackintoshes are. There is only one case where the MacBook Pro comes first. This is when it's about to convert videos to HEVC format. And I think it comes probably from the T2 chipset that is included that enables a faster conversion. Most of the time the AMD is first, and we are comparing a Ryzen 5 to a i9. This is really impressive. So, was it worth all this effort? Was it worth the pain and all the complexity of this build? As a daily driver, does this computer answer to my most secret hopes? I will answer to this in a minute. But maybe you agree with me, this computer really looks great, minimalistic and elegant. Nobody wants something ugly 24 hours a day on his desk, and Apple contributed to make the computer design evolve a lot for the last 20 years.
Because God forbid the angles be 90.1 instead of 90.
I forbid the angles to be 90.1 instead of 90. That box could be on display at the Guggenheim.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the words. So yes, it was worth the effort and the pain, because you have done all of this for that very moment when you launch a task with a big load and suddenly nothing happens. No reaction, no ramping, no sign of the activity, and you understand that you have been doing all of this for that very reason. So now let's enter the negative zone. There is one major inconvenience in my opinion that is linked to the form factor of the DB4 Streamcom itself. As you see, there is very small space at the bottom and you take the risk of bending the cables, and I strongly recommend using angled extenders or connectors. Unless you want to lift the case every time you want to connect any peripherals that you need in your configuration, the 2 USB ports at the angle won't be enough. This case is quite heavy and you won't be able to move it all along. A second problem comes from the Hackintosh configuration and process by itself. To get into it, I think I had bad luck with my first configuration based on an Intel Asus motherboard. Now that I have experienced this, I think the problem comes from the way macOS treats the XMP profile of the RAM. That's a bummer, because otherwise you disengage this profile, but you cannot take advantage of the full speed of your memory. Then again, I'm not a Hackintosh specialist. I am speaking on a casual user point of view, and you will find a lot of informations and a great devoted, dedicated Hackintosh community, whether they focus on Intel builds or AMD builds, and the AMD OS X community is really great. You will find very comprehensive guides with all the tips and tricks that you need, but keep in mind that a Hackintosh will never be a Macintosh. I feel like some backup is needed. Hackintosh remains a great option for people who are not afraid of getting their hands into the dirt. My best advice would be as follows. If you have a friend, a colleague, a relative who went through this process with great success, it will be your best ally if you want to achieve such a build. Otherwise, building a Hackintosh from scratch can be something very tricky and time-consuming. The last problem that you can find quite paradoxical is linked to some cooling problems of the DB4 Streamcom itself. Let's have a look at the thermals. If we put this configuration under a serious stress test, we can see that the CPU will reach quickly a temperature above 80 degrees, which is not ideal, not good, but Apple also built its last generation of Intel iMac on the same principle. Heavy load is not meant to last, as we can see also in this video by short circuits. That being said, a computer is not only a CPU and GPU. Keep in mind there are a lot of chipsets dedicated to many tasks, this task being essential sometimes. In a classical configuration, a fan is dedicated to cool your system as a whole. Ali at Optimum Tech addressed this problem when he made a build based also on a DB4 and realized that some of the VRAM were not cooled properly and make some thermothrottling. In my experience, I encountered thermothrottling, for example, for the Ethernet, which I found very weird. I am speaking of this build working after hours and hours and be pushed to its limits, but still, maybe we need to find some midpoint between passive cooling and some classical solutions. Maybe I will make a video about this problem, and I'm already thinking about some possible upgrades with additional fans. Of course, if you are a passive cooling solution fan, which is fun to say, you will find that this kind of intent can kill the very spirit of this case, which is again really great. So let me know in the comments down below if you want me to make more videos about upgrading this build, how much silence matters for you, how much are you willing to pay to have a quieter computer. I will put links in the description down below for all the components. So believe it or not, this is my first Hackintosh. This is my first build ever after all these years using mainly laptops or Mac Mini. And this is my first video on YouTube. This can only succeed with your support, so please consider subscribing if you enjoy this content, and thumbs up also are welcome. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all very soon on that channel.